Powell cuts and says the president can't fire him. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Ainsley Insights, brought to you by Ainsley Bullion, Ainsley Crypto, and the Gold and Silver Standard as the Ainsley Group celebrates 50 years. Today, we welcome back Sam, who's been looking at the Fed's most recent rate cut decision and some interesting comments by the Fed chair around whether the next president can kick him out of his position. How are you going today, Sam?
Good, Chris. Haven't seen you in a while.
No, we've been so busy we haven't had a chance to get on top of all these, but we're getting back in the swing of them. We're forcing our way through, what a good time to do it. So much has been happening in the markets, particularly after that rate decision that we had last week. And really interesting there in your article today, talking about first of all that and Powell's comments around it. Let's start us off. Was it a surprise for you? What were you expecting?
Um, Look, I'm not sure if it was too much of a surprise, but there was a lot in the media. There were stories just bubbling over everywhere about how now that Trump is going to be in office, he's going to cause inflation. He wants to devalue the dollar. He's going to make the dollar get really weak, and that's going to make the Fed want to come in and, hike interest rates or pause or something like this. Well, that totally didn't happen. In fact, he not only did they cut, but they directly shut down the idea of Trump changing anything. So, also contrary to that, the U.S. dollar has been really strong. Since Trump was essentially elected. So that's a complete spin on what we've been hearing from mainstream news.
And that caught me off guard a little bit there. I was certainly expecting volatility through that election period, but the dollar strengthening on the back of that. Initially, I thought, I didn't know how it responded under Trump winning the election, but it kind of does make sense, really, doesn't it, when you think through the implications potentially of tariffs? Because initially I was thinking that could be negative for the dollar, but it actually is quite possibly a support.
Yeah, it's I mean, there's a lot of criticism of just his strategy of having tariffs or increasing the money supply, but people aren't mentioning things like huge tax cuts that will come in, businesses that will want to come into the country and start operating there so they can pay less tax and make more money. Certain companies being protected, so that being better for employment. You know, how many people have been working at auto factory or something, and now they don't have a job anymore. So you have to look at it holistically.
And that's such a good point, because the bigger picture, it's not just about one issue like tariffs. It's about all of those other things you just mentioned coming together. And it all does look quite positive. Certainly the markets have interpreted it that way. But the other big part of the article, which was fascinating, was you mentioned that Powell was pushing back against talk that Trump could fire him. I actually saw that little clip where he was saying effectively, well, no, I'm not worried about that. He can't fire me. Like he's claiming that wouldn't be legal. Break that down, because that to me is absolutely fascinating.
Well, as you're probably aware, the Federal Reserve is not federal. It's just in name, so it's about as federal as Federal Express or Federal Coffee or Federal whatever. So they are independent from the government, but they can control the nation's money. So that's a pretty big that's a pretty big power to have and not be answerable to the president. So as Greenspan said before, the Fed is not answerable to the president. The Fed's not answerable to anyone. They're independent, which pretty much means the government can try to do whatever it's want. The government can try to tell them what to do and say whatever it wants, but the Fed can act as it wants to act, which is a pretty big statement to make to the media.
And it is a big statement, because it sort of brings it to the front of people's minds, because a lot of people wouldn't know that the Federal Reserve is not federal, as you've pointed out. I mean,
Mhm.
you can read a lot about that, and it is such a fascinating story. But do you think that Powell pushing back here, particularly doing that directly and so hard, could potentially backfire? Because I imagine a lot of people who hadn't thought about it will all of a sudden be going, "What? How can he say that?" And then that
Mhm.
could potentially attract a lot of criticism, I would imagine.
Of course. When you're in a position of power, the last thing you want to do is say, I can do whatever I want.
Mm.
You know, it's like the leader of a country. They say, well, why don't you do this for the people? And he says, because I'm a dictator. I just do whatever I want. I mean, that's the worst response you could give is, I have the power. So what are people going to try to do? Potentially take away the power.
Mm.
Now, after this article came out, We had a post from, this is from Utah Senator Mike Lee. So he just said that, quote, the executive branch should be under the direction of the president. That's how the Constitution was designed. The Federal Reserve is one of many examples of how we've deviated from the Constitution in that regard. Yet another reason why we should end the Fed. So this is a US senator that just called off the back of the statement to end the Fed. That's huge. And what's even bigger than that, Elon Musk, who will now be in charge of getting rid of parts of the government that he sees being wasteful, Elon Musk just reposted that. This is huge. And this is something I've been talking about with you for probably the past year. Every time we've had a chat, I've been saying the news has just become, what's the Fed doing? Nobody looks at what a company's earned anymore. Nobody looks at any details. All they look at is the Fed going to print money, or are they going to be restrictive? Buy everything, sell everything. It's all about the Fed. And the Fed's been really happy to come out and take the spotlight and have all the Fed speakers come out and push you this way, push you that way. Oh, we're going to cut. Oh, actually, maybe not going to cut. Waller says this. Kashkari says that. It's just this big thing where they've put themselves in the spotlight, and now they're coming out and claiming you can't do anything to us. So this is essentially putting a target on them.
I mean, you said just that point about that's being huge news. This isn't the first time we've heard the words "end the Fed," right? Like we've had that sort of grassroots campaign for a long period of time, but it's never gone anywhere because they've been effectively fringe candidates who weren't in a position to do that. Now, obviously, Elon Musk is not the one who won the presidency there, but clearly, if you've got a sitting senator and you've got that sort of firepower behind, I mean, we know in Trump's acceptance speech, for example, there was a lot of time given to Trump in that. So these are people who've certainly got his ear. Does it happen this time? Is there potential for this to actually gain some momentum beyond just sort of that fringe?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most followed, one of the most popular people in the public eye, Elon Musk. And then, funnily enough, he's being hired to get rid of parts of the government which aren't being effective and which are wasting money. When people find out what a national debt actually is, when they find out it's not for building roads and libraries, when they find out that just the tax on things like canned food or petrol in the US can more than pay for roads and libraries 10 times over, when they find out what the national debt is actually from, borrowing money, and what institution is lending that money, and who's in charge of that institution, that's where people start to potentially get on board with Mike Lee and with Elon Musk. And those are some big names to be putting that out there.
Look, this is absolutely fascinating to watch, and I doubt we've heard the end of it. As I said, it hasn't really gotten to the level it needed to get to really have that push that will put the pressure on them. But this could be it this time around. So we're going to have to keep paying attention. Absolutely fascinating. And I'm sure you'll keep us up to date on it. So thank you for your deep dive on that today.
Thanks, Chris. This will be a wild 4 years.
It will be a wild 4 years. We'll have plenty to talk about in Insights, that's for sure. Thanks, everyone, for watching. We'll chat again soon.